Hey there, good morning, and hopefully you're maybe grabbing a bite to eat here. Let's continue on in Galatians. We're now moving to the next verse, Galatians 3:11. Just walking real slowly here through this section of one of the most densely packed passages in the New Testament of Old Testament quotations. Yesterday we looked at Galatians 3, verse 10, in the quotation from Deuteronomy 27, and now today we're looking at verse 11, where Paul is quoting from Habakkuk 2, verse 4. And so let's get to it and look at this today. Let me read verse 11. Now it is evident that no one is justified before God by the law, for, here's the quote, the righteous shall live by faith. Okay, so yesterday we were looking at verse 10, how Paul was making the point from Deuteronomy that if we rely on our works of the law for our salvation, if we're relying on our works of the law for our salvation, if our hope is in our ability to be moral enough, then we are under God's curse. We're under God's curse, friend, because we can't. Because we can't ever do enough. We can't ever be obedient enough. If we ever break the law at one point, we might as well have disobeyed all of it. And consider yesterday 613 commands in the law of Moses. Considered the last six of the 10 commandments. And we so easily fall short. We so easily fall short. We can't hope in ourselves. And so Paul is pivoting here to reveal and tell us the law wasn't even designed for that. The law wasn't even designed to make us righteous. We're not supposed to live by works of the law. We're supposed to live by faith. That's what he's saying here in verse 11. So again, like yesterday, same kind of structure. Paul makes an assertion and he backs it up with an affirmation from the Old Testament. So let's look at this, right? So you can see it here on the screen. Assertion, and then the affirmation. It is evident that no one is justified before God by the law. Okay, that's his claim, the claim that he's been making here all along. No one is justified before God. All right, so we're not justified before God by the law. And I think perhaps by emphasizing this before God, that Paul might be making a little bit of a dig here against his opponents that are affirming the works of the law as the means of justification by saying, hey, look, you might be able to be justified before men by the law, by these works of the law, but you will not be justified before God. And that's what ultimately matters. You might be able to put on for a while the facade of holiness, but God knows the heart. He knows the heart. And on the final day, when you stand before him, you will have to give an account. And the only account that will have any merit before the Lord is Christ alone. He will say, yes, Lord, I deserve judgment. I deserve your just punishment for my sin. I deserve death. But for Christ who died for me, I will be justified before God, not by the law, but by faith. And that's the affirmation from the Old Testament, from Habakkuk 2:4. All right, so you can go and read the book of Habakkuk. It's relatively short. It's an interesting read, and what we're seeing as Paul quotes from 2:4 in Habakkuk, the prophet Habakkuk, in his day, he was recording where 2:4 comes. He records the words of the Lord. He's recording the response that God makes to him after he's made his appeal, his second appeal. He's grieved before the Lord that first, that Judah is as sinful as she was. And so he's asking the Lord to make things right. And God says, okay, I'm going to send Babylon to bring about my judgment. And Habakkuk's like, what? There are more wicked people than we. How can they be your means of judgment? And it is in that context that Habakkuk 2:4 is recorded. This is part of the Lord's response to the prophet. He's going to send Babylon to carry out judgment on Judah. And he responds saying that evildoers like Babylon, they will face judgment. Right? So Habakkuk, fear not, they will face judgment. But nevertheless, the righteous will live by surrendered confidence and persevering trust in God and in his promises. That's Yahweh's point to the prophet. That's the word for the nation of Israel as they look off to the future, to the coming day when Babylon will come. The northern kingdom of Israel had already been destroyed by the nation of Assyria. Assyria now is on the decline. Babylon's on the rise, and Yahweh is telling the prophet to Judah, Babylon's going to come and bring about judgment. He will execute my covenant curses that we looked at from the end of Deuteronomy yesterday. Those curses, many of them, will be brought about by the hand of the evil people of Babylon. But the righteous will live by an enduring confidence and trust in me. That's Yahweh's point in the letter, or in the book of Habakkuk. The righteous live by surrendered confidence and persevering trust in God and his promises despite present circumstances. Or to put it more simply, the righteous will live by faith. To live by faith, right? And the words here are the same. I mean, it's the same concept. It's from the Greek root word, from the Deek word group, justified and righteous. The justified shall live by faith, right? The primacy of faith. That's the whole thing. That is the imperative, that we have faith, that we express faith, and that faith looks like an enduring confidence in God and in his promises. It was true. We saw in Galatians chapter 3, verse 6, that faith is the imperative, is the primary necessity of Abraham. It was because Abram had faith that he was justified. And now we're seeing in Judah during Habakkuk's day that faith is what is necessary. That's almost 1,500 years after Abraham. 1,500 years, and it is still functioning the same way. That God is still calling for his people to trust in his promises and to trust in him. And by faith, live and move and proceed forward. And it was true in Paul's day, as he writes here to the Galatians. And friend, it is true today as well. We live by faith, not by our works. We will not be justified before God any other way. And at times like we live in now, with this pandemic going on, these unusual, once in a century, God willing kind of circumstances, they stretch our faith. They stretch our faith. Are we going to trust in God and in his promises? Are we going to trust in him? Are we going to believe in him even in the midst of COVID-19? Where will we turn? What will we look to? Are we going to start to pivot away from faith in Christ alone? It's possible that is a temptation in our isolation from our local churches, from the brotherhood, the sisterhood that we enjoy by the Spirit with other Christians, that we would be allured to believe another gospel, that we would be persuaded maybe even to think that we just need to exert faith like some kind of spiritual force to compel God to keep us healthy or to make us healthy. May it not be so, friends. May it not be so. Press on to live by faith. Faith in Christ and in his finished work. That is our only hope.